Welcome back to Estate Planning Nightmares and How to Avoid Them. I'm your host, John Braddock, author of Click Here When I Die, and the founder of My Life and Wishes, The Legacy Vault, an online planning and document storage solution created to make things easier for those you love. I'm thrilled to have you join us today. If you're just tuning in for the very first time, this is the show where we uncover the hidden pitfalls of estate planning and share a real cautionary tale to equip you with practical tools to protect your family and your legacy. Today, I am joined once again by my friend and fellow Arizonan, Marjorie Desmond of Desmond Law. Marjorie first joined us back in March when we tackled the surprising story of a large sum of money accidentally going to someone who was thought to have been disinherited. If you missed that episode, I encourage you to go back, give it a listen. This time, we're diving into a fascinating and often, shall we say, overlooked topic, pet trust. We'll explore what they are, why they're important, and the potential consequences of not having one in place. But before we jump in today, let me just tell you a little bit more about Marjorie. Marjorie is a personal family lawyer with a passion for families and ensuring that your wishes are carried out no matter what life throws at you. Her approach to estate planning is thoughtful and ongoing, and creating customized plans that adapt as life changes. Marjorie attended Stanford University and the Loyola Law School in Los Angeles, where she served as a note and comment editor for the Law Review and published her own articles. Over the years, her career has spanned from maritime law, public service with the U.S. Customs and Border Protection, and commercial litigation in Arizona. In 2010, after moving to Scottsdale, she shifted her focus to proactive estate planning, helping families avoid legal pitfalls and ensuring they're protected in times of crisis. She's been admitted to 5 federal district courts, the United States Supreme Court, and is an active member of Wealth Council and the Maricopa County Bar Association. Now, when she's not practicing law, Marjorie enjoys reading, traveling, horseback riding, playing classical piano. She's been married for 30 years, has 2 adult children, and, importantly, a horse named Sunny. Marjorie, welcome back to the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate you having me on your show, John.
Oh, it's my pleasure. We've known each other for many years now, and it's always fun to talk with you. There's always great stories to share. But the one thing that's always intrigued me, because I see with your social media posts and things, you always reference Sunny, and Sunny is your horse. And I know a lot of people may have heard of a pet trust or those kinds of things. A lot of people don't have them. So what I wanted to do is, as you and I had talked, I wanted to get you back on, excited to be able to chat with you, about pet trust. So let's start with the basics. For listeners who might not be familiar, what exactly is a pet trust?
Well, I mean, I think you're right in that oftentimes our furry friends kind of don't get the attention that they should when we're doing our estate planning. But first, the important thing to know is that you cannot leave money to a pet. So you can't just say, I'm going to leave money to Sunny. And what was really funny is this last Christmas, my kids apparently were having a conversation about how much money mom was going to leave to Sunny after she died. And now I don't know why they're having that conversation. But anyway, so they apparently were kind of wondering. And especially when you talk to other horse owners, people are like, 10, well, no, 20, I mean, horse maintenance, even if you got the free horse, we all know there's no such thing, and they're very expensive to maintain. So if you're gone, they still need expensive maintenance, and you can't just leave them money to cover their costs. So that's the first thing that is important to understand, is that if you're not around, you can't leave them money. But there are workarounds. So the only reason you can't leave them money is because they're an animal, and you only can leave money to, people or businesses. So what you can do, there are certain, ways of handling this. There's the I'm going to leave my pet dog to my daughter who loves my dog more than life itself. So I know she'd be fine taking care of the dog. And I just say, here, Catherine, you get the dog. And that way, okay, if you do it that way, that's the easiest way. But there's no guarantee that my daughter is going to have the money to care for the dog, be able to have the dog in her apartment, have time to spend with the dog, all those things. And she could decide after a year of having the dog or a week having the dog, I don't want the dog anymore. I'm going to give the dog away. And so if I mean, especially if you don't have a trusted family member who's going to care for your pet and loves them like you do, if you just say I'm going to, leave my dog to my neighbor, there's no safeguard to make sure that that neighbor really is going to continue to care for the pet. They just get the pet, and once the pet's theirs, they can do whatever they want, including drop them off at the pound. And certainly when you're talking to horse owners, the real fear for us is they're going to get dropped off at an auction house or kill shelter where they can be bought and turned into, dog food in Mexico or Canada. So, that's the real fear there. So, what you can do instead is, and just to back up a minute, I mean, no matter how you leave pets, if you have pets, you should leave instructions on who their vet is. Are they on any kind of medications? How many times do they eat a day? How much do they eat? Do they have any food allergies? Anything like that that someone who is caring for the pet would need to know. Do you have the phone number of a trusted pet sitter so that you could at least get through the first couple weeks of, trauma to the family and figuring out, okay, we can just have so and so care for the animal until we get organized.
Yeah,
And
and
that's something
including behavioral issues too, right? Because you
absolutely.
know there's a lot of and we're not referencing a horse at the moment, so maybe we're referencing dogs, right? And so someone might have a Rottweiler or a pit bull, and having instructions that says not good around small children, or
Yeah,
you
are
know
not good with other dogs, or
right,
don't take his food away from him.
yeah,
And this is actually funny. Okay, my sister's son has a Welsh Corgi, and we were given instructions at Thanksgiving that the dog is a herding dog, and he doesn't like people just congregating by the door, and he doesn't like people hugging each other. Well, at Thanksgiving, that's a little difficult, but when people are kind of gathered around the door, he wants to herd them either into the living room or out the door. So, so it's just funny. So your pet might have these idiosyncrasies, like get stressed out on the 4th of July or whatever else that people should be aware of so that they can prepare for them. And those
yeah,
instructions are things that anyone can just sit down and write. This is what someone would need to know. Here's the phone number of my vet. And those are just the instructions for the pet, and anybody can do those.
yeah.
But more importantly, we were talking about pet trusts and what you can do. And this is the, legally valid way of making sure that your pets are cared for. So
Yeah.
if
Hey,
I say,
Marjorie, if I may, let
yeah,
me, in legal jargon, let's take a sidebar here for a second. So, so to be clear for our listener, what what we're saying is, and I think you all understand this, pets are a very important part of our life. Especially, now, our kids might be out of the house, gone. It may be a dog, it may be a cat. Um, it could be a desert tortoise. It could be a macaw.
yeah,
Uh,
they live
you
a
know,
long time.
yeah, or a snake, God forbid. Um, but if I don't make it home tonight, I want to know that someone is going to take the same kind of care of my pet as I did, and love them, because it's very stressful, on an animal, and that would give me the ultimate peace of mind knowing it's going to happen. And so, as we said, it's easy for us to write down things like, here's the veterinarian, Here's my dog sitter. Here's the feeding instructions. Here's where I keep the food. Don't give them you give them the blue buffalo. Don't give them Purina. Make sure you have
Yeah.
all that listed out. And we build that all into the legacy vault so that we can leave those instructions for people. But the thing that um, would give me more peace of mind is, like you mentioned earlier, is that knowing that if I leave my pet to a son or daughter who say, yes, they'll definitely take the animal. And then all of a sudden I die and they're not in a position to take care of the animal. They either, hey, have another pet of their own and they don't get along. Maybe they live in an apartment that doesn't allow pets, those kind of things. Now, all the planning that I did initially on my own by writing this out and saying, hey, will you take care of, Sparky? um, doesn't come. And so I want that added peace of mind. And I think that's where the pet trust kind of ties in. Am I right?
Absolutely. I mean, certainly, okay, so what is a pet trust? I mean, we start with the very basic, you've got a trust, and a trust I like to compare with a bucket. And it's you put your things and title them in the bucket, so the bucket owns the things. And because the pet is really counted as personal property, you don't have to retitle your dog, but um, you you own the dog, and then you can designate what happens to the dog. Now, you can also say, well, upon my passing, it's going to be a separate trust created for my dog. And let's say I'm going to allocate, let's say $10,000 for my dog. And I will say that, John, that you're going to be the trustee of this $10,000 for the dog. And I'm going to leave as the caretaker of my dog, let's say my son who lives in Scottsdale. So then you would have control over the money, and you would have to follow the instructions of the pet trust saying that as long as my son is taking good care of my dog, then he gets my dog's expenses reimbursed. He gets money to buy the food, take him to the vet, get shots, get medication, and things like that for the dog. And so you, as the trustee for the dog, would mete out the money that it was set aside for the pet to the caretaker to make sure that he continued to be cared for properly. And that is kind of the insurance that we get that the dog is going to be continue to be cared for, and that the person who's receiving the animal has the funds to do so. I mean, certainly with sick pets or older pets or pets on medication, I mean, the cost can really add up. And certainly, with horses, you've got to put them somewhere. Not everybody has a place in their backyard to put them, so and that gets expensive too. So this just makes sure the funds are there, that there's somebody checking on the pet to make sure they're still being cared for the way they should. And you can leave instructions in the pet trust of what you're going to cover. And then you would have the caretaker, and then you'd have a backup caretaker. So let's say my son moved to an apartment where they didn't allow trust, or I'm sorry, they didn't allow pets. And he told you, hey, I've got my mom's dog, but I'm moving and I can't keep the dog. Then the next person on the list that I designated, not a friend of his, but a friend of mine, somebody that I had designated, would be the next person on the list who would be available to take the dog. And then that would be something that you would check.
That's peace of mind.
Absolutely. And then if both of them were unable, then I could always just say, if the caretakers are unable to care for the dog or don't want to, then I would like, say, my vet to rehome the dog to another, good animal owner. And so you can designate who would make the decisions for the pet, because maybe you don't know about those kinds of dogs or something, or you don't have a dog and don't know what to do with dogs. then you would have someone else making the decisions. And again, you would be covering the expenses for the pet.
You know,
Okay, so
that's a really good
and
point because
and
the
and let's
the yeah, the funding is critical. You know, we can say I'm going to leave, my dog or my cat to a son or daughter, and yeah, it costs some money. There's vet visits and potentially an illness or something, so it needs some money. Feeding it, grooming, those kind of things. Smaller amount. A horse is a whole different animal, to state the obvious, right? Um, so is there yeah, I can do simple math in my head. All right, what are the annual expenses, these kind of things? Is there like a calculator or something that someone can say, all right, here's the type of pet I have, here's how old it is now, here's its life expectancy, and how do I measure out how much money I should set aside to go into that trust?
Well, and I think that would be just having a budget. What do you spend now? And for example, for a horse, they get shoes and they get a dental check every year and they have to get their, fall shots and, so there are a bunch of expenses and us horse owners know generally what we're spending on them and what kind of medication we're already spending money on. And the supplements are very expensive too, and you can decide, what you think is appropriate. But um, so just take your current budget and then realize for an older animal that might go up. I mean, just like people, we all get old and then we need more medical care than we ever thought we would, or ever wanted to. And so that would go up with pets too. And then I would also just have a conversation with your vet who knows your animal's physical condition and just say, okay, in your experience, how long does this animal tend to live? And then it's just a matter of doing the math and then looking at your estate and what you can afford and, kind of what makes sense for the whole big picture. So it's
Yeah.
just a matter of, figuring out some math and life expectancy and the age of the animal and things like that. And that of course changes because if you first do your estate planning when you get a puppy, you kind of don't know. But then if 10 years go by and the puppy's now 10 years old, it might be a whole different thing as far as how much you're spending or what kind of care they need or how much money you have. So that's just one of those things to reevaluate.
So updating your pet trust every couple of years, just like I do my own trust, becomes,
Hmm.
an essential piece.
Yeah, it would just be part of the whole thing, part of the whole picture. Because too, I'm sure the instructions for your pet are going to change in 10 years.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, we call the show Estate Planning Nightmares. So, and I know you've been doing this a long time, and we talk about the importance of pet trust. Have you seen scenarios that have occurred where a person did not have a pet trust and, you know, things went awry, shall we say?
I have, and unfortunately, this was in the context of horses. And a gentleman had three Missouri Foxtrotters, which are I mean, they have a special gait. They're kind of like the Ferrari of horses, sort of. I mean, I'm sure horse owners might disagree with me, but they are fun to ride. Anyway, he had three of these horses and he passed. He had a girlfriend, so not a spouse, and he had kids of a prior relationship. And then he also had a caretaker for the horses. And he left, one of the horses to his girlfriend and then the other horses to the caretaker. Well, a lot of times we think that the caretaker loves our animals like we do, but for them, maybe it's just a job. Maybe they like the paycheck and they put up with the animals, and maybe they say they're going to be doing great things for the pets once we're gone. But in this case, the horses got sold and, kind of separated, scattered, and ended up God knows where. And because you don't necessarily bond when you have a bond with your pet, it doesn't mean that the person you're leaving your pet with is going to have that same bond. So, if you have a dog that loves you and then you pass on and the dog goes to someone else that he just bites, I mean, that person isn't going to want to keep that dog around very long. So,
Yeah.
and then though the other thing to think about is what happens if something happens to the person you leave the pet with? I mean, a lot of times we see that on the horse websites, rehoming because I've been diagnosed with an illness or I'm, too old and I can't handle this responsibility anymore, or I lost my job and my finances won't support this animal. And so that can certainly happen to the person you've appointed to take your pet as well. So that's why it's such a great idea to separate the money from the pet to make sure the pet's going to continue getting the money no matter what, and that money isn't just going to go to the caretaker's rent or food or whatever, whatever else.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. So over Thanksgiving, with my parents, and mom always loved cats. She had cats her entire life. And now she's at that point where they no longer have pets. And, they make that decision, as so many do. It's like, I can't get more pets at this point because
Mhm.
I know I will predecease my pet, and it's not fair to the pet. And then who's going to take care of them and those kind of things. And I'm pretty sure there's not a lot of people that write a pet trust on a cat, right? But but
No.
but but the importance with these larger animals, I mean, we live here down here in the desert, and there's the desert tortoises. They can live 150 years. I've known people, or known of them, I don't personally know them, who have these tortoises. It's like,
And they can get
it,
big too.
oh, they're huge. And it's like, and parrots and the macaws specifically live between, because I was looking at some notes, at 50 and 100 years, a cockatoo 60 to 70 years. Now, if I'm a bird guy, which I'm not, but you know now at 60, it's like, I'm not going to go get a baby macaw, right? Because someone's got to take care of it. And if you have one, please don't leave it to me, because I don't want that. Right.
That's right. That's right. I mean, they certainly can outlive us. And
Yeah.
so, it requires some thought and planning as to where they would end up.
Yeah. What's the life expectancy of a horse, like Sunny, as an example?
Well, they can live between, say, 30 to 40 years. And
Yeah.
so that's a long time,
Yeah.
so
Wow. So important. So important. Yeah, I mean, we talk about it all the time. And, number one, I think it's critical, if you're a pet owner, is to, at a minimum, make sure you provide instructions. If I don't come home tonight, where's the dog going to go? I've already talked to that person. They're in agreement, and maybe you even have a backup person, another son or
well,
daughter.
and there, I mean, just making sure if you're boarding your horse at a barn, make sure the barn has a phone number for someone else in your family, not just you.
Great point. Great point. When the barn hasn't heard from you in a month,
Right?
and the boarding fees are due, and those kind of things. Yeah. Yeah, there's a whole
Right. Or the
plan.
horse hasn't been turned out and everyone's kind of wondering what happened to you and no one knows how to get a hold of anyone else in the family to find out what's going on.
Yeah. It's strange analogy, but it's not dissimilar from you know parents of minor children being sure that they have guardianship in
Right.
place.
Where, say, the kids don't get picked up from childcare. I mean, the childcare always has a backup phone number. They always collect that when you sign up for preschool or daycare or even school. They make you put some backup phone numbers just in case.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, this is really interesting. An interesting topic. It's why I wanted to talk about it, because we hear so much about it, and I think people many times don't really understand what they are, but it's truly insightful. Um, but before we kind of button this up, is there anything else that you'd like to add relative to pet trusts or estate planning in general?
Oh, I did think about one thing. Sometimes people don't want to go through setting up a whole trust for their pet, and they just want a certain amount of money to go with the pet. So they'll just say, okay, my son gets the dog and he gets an extra gift of, say, $5,000. And the thing is, what you can't do is make that $5,000 conditional on how long the dog's going to live. So it could be that the dog, lives for another, 15 years, or the tortoise or the bird or something lives for forever. Um, but or the dog could just be so heartsick that I'm gone, it could just like die the next week. And then you just have to be comfortable if that's how you do it. And if you don't set up the trust, you have to be comfortable saying, well, he made sure that the dog's last week of life was fine. Yes, he gets the extra $5,000. Um, because you can't kind of take the money back, you know, um, if the pet's not around. And so that's what makes the pet trust flexible is in that case, if there was a pet trust for the dog, for example, in that instance, and the dog, was so heartsick that I was gone that the dog keeled over a week later, the pet trust would pay for whatever the expenses were for that week, and then the rest of the money in that account would then just go back to the other beneficiaries in the trust. They'd say, okay, well, if there now is no longer a pet to support, the rest is going to get dumped back into the pot to be distributed the way you would normally distribute those assets.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a great point. I hadn't even thought of that as if someone and again, I have no idea what it takes to take care of a horse on an annual basis, but I'm going to guess with grooming and stalls and cleaning and feeding and vets and everything, maybe 20 grand a year. Am I
Yeah,
low?
that's probably close.
So
And that's as
yes,
much as anyone wants to admit. And those are the not fancy horses. Certainly the ones
yeah.
in training or that travel or whatever are going to be more than that. But
Yeah, so it's
yeah,
an
it can be a
interesting
lot.
thought. So if I figured, all right, the horse was going to maybe have another 10 years and figured that out, and I set aside $200,000, but it's in the trust and there's a trustee and a person, handling the funds. And if that horse passed, 5 years down the road and there's $150,000 or whatever left in the pot, the disposition of that, but that would then uh, follow back to the original trust document would say it'd be divided up proportionally or however
Right. It wouldn't
to
necessarily it wouldn't go to necessarily to your animal caregiver. It would go to whoever you've designated to get your other assets.
very interesting. Very interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that, but that's why you're the attorney and you
We've
share
got to
your
think of all
knowledge.
the unlikely and instances of what could happen so that when weird things do happen, because we know that they do, because reality tends to be weirder than fiction. It's the potentials are all taken care of.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, Marjorie, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to have you on and have a conversation.
Well, it's just something to think about. And, if people decide, well, it's not worth doing, that's okay. But at least there should be some provision for, you've talked to some member of the family about whether they could, would, or wouldn't take your pet. I mean, that's a conversation as part of figuring out everything else.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And then
Yeah, very
if you do
much
want
like,
to trust set up to prepare, for their support, then that's something that should be part of the estate planning process.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's just like I go on vacation. I leave a list of instructions of what to do for whoever's coming in and taking care of my pet. This is just like that, but it's the final version.
That's right. Absolutely. And because, I mean, hopefully we don't do the plan right before we die. I mean, we don't know when that day will come. we've got to make it flexible so that, whatever comes is taken care of.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thanks again. And to all of you, our listeners, if you'd like to learn more about Marjorie and the work she does, visit azlegacylawyer.com. That's azlegacylawyer.com, or connect with her on social media. And to make it really easy, I've included all of her contact information below in the show notes. As always,
Wonderful.
if you enjoyed
Thank
this
you.
episode, we always appreciate a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to Estate Planning Nightmares and How to Avoid Them so that you never miss an episode. And until next time, this is John Braddock reminding you that your life is your legacy. So plan ahead, protect your loved ones, and avoid the nightmares.